The man went under for the second time at 6:09 on a Thursday morning, and the fisherman was already in the water before anyone on the shore thought to move. It was the kind of sea that arrives without announcement, flat and gray at dawn, then suddenly alive with a current that runs against the surface in the opposite direction from the waves. The kind that pulls at the ankles and turns a man who can swim into a man who cannot. The fishing boats had not gone out yet. Kwadwo Mensah had been untangling a net on the sand when he heard it. Not a shout, because the man was past shouting by then, but a sound that is not a shout and not silence. The sound a person makes when they have already understood what is happening to them. He dropped the net. He ran. He was in the water in 11 seconds. The man he pulled to shore was wearing good clothes, a pressed white shirt, now soaked through. Leather shoes still on his feet. He had the look of someone who had walked too close to the water's edge for reasons Kwadwo did not know and did not ask. He sat the man up on the wet sand and pressed his back twice until the sea came out of him. The man coughed for a long time. Kwadwo crouched beside him and waited. The man looked at him. He said, "Between coughs, I can't, Kwadwo said. "You're out now. Just breathe." He did not know that what the man was trying to say was not about the water. His name was Kwadwo Mensah, and he was 54 years old, and the fishing had been difficult for 7 years. Not impossible, just difficult, in the way that difficult becomes normal when it runs long enough that you stop measuring it against anything else. He was lean in the way of men who eat what they catch and have been catching less. The kind of lean that is not weakness, but is not health either. Something in between that his wife Alma recognized and did not say anything about because saying something about it did not change it. His hands were the color and texture of the nets he worked, dark, roughened, capable, marked by salt and rope and years of the same work the same way in the same place. He lived in a compound of 4 rooms in Anamabo, a fishing town on the central region coast of Ghana, 37 kilometers east of Cape Coast. The compound had been his father's and his father's father's before that. The walls were whitewashed cement that had not been whitewashed in 11 years and had taken on the color of the air near the ocean, a gray-white that was neither gray nor white. Something the sea makes out of everything it touches long enough. The roof over the main room had a section above the eastern corner that needed new zinc sheeting. When the rains came, Kwadwo placed a plastic basin under it and emptied the basin in the morning. He had been doing this for 2 rains now, which was 2 years, because a sheet of zinc that would cover the corner cost 180 cedis, and the 180 cedis had not accumulated in one place long enough to be used for the roof. He had a wife and 2 daughters. Amma was 49 and ran a small chop bar on the main road through Anamabo, rice, Contamire stew, fried fish on the days when Kwadwo's catch was large enough to leave some at home. She got up at 4:30 every morning to start the fire and was still at it at 8:00 in the evening, 6 days a week. And what she made from the chop bar paid for the daughter's school expenses and the compound's electricity bill and the cooking gas and most of the food. Because what the fishing paid for had been shrinking. It paid for the boat maintenance. It paid for the net repairs. It paid, slowly and in installments, for the loan. The loan was the thing Kwadwo did not speak about at the dinner table and Amma did not ask about directly. Not because they did not trust each other, but because some things become larger when you say them out loud, and both of them understood this without it ever being discussed. He had taken it 3 years ago from a microfinance company called Bright Future Credit, based in Cape Coast, when the outboard motor on the boat seized and needed a full replacement. The new motor had cost 3,200 cedis. He had borrowed 3,500 cedis, because the loan officer, a young man named Kofi Borima, whose name was printed on a laminated card he set on the table at the beginning of every appointment, had suggested taking a little more than the need to cover any other costs that might arise. The interest rate was 24% per annum, which Kofi Barima had explained was very competitive. Kwadwo had signed the form. The remaining balance, at the time of the rescue, was 2,870 cedis, which had been 2,870 cedis for 4 months because the catch had not recovered enough to make any payment beyond the interest. Every month Kwadwo paid 57 cedis in interest, and the principal did not move. He had done this calculation himself, at the kitchen table with a pencil and the back of an old fishing record, and what the calculation showed was that at the current payment rate, the loan would take 11 more years to clear. He kept the fishing record in the drawer beneath the radio. He did not show it to Amma. The object he kept on the boat, the one that had been there since his father died, and before that since his grandfather first put it there, was a small carved wooden fish the length of his palm, worn smooth by decades of hands. The kind of smooth that is not the smoothness of new things, but of old things that have been held continuously and will not stop being held. He did not know what wood it was made from. His father had not known either. It was dark, almost black, and it floated, he had verified this once, when it fell overboard in the shallow water near the beach, and he grabbed it before the current took it. He did not put it back in his pocket. He set it on the prow of the boat, where it had always been, and left it there. His skill, the one that nobody outside Anamabo knew about, and that had never once been written on any form in any office, was that he could read the sea's surface the way other men read text. The particular chop pattern that meant a current was reversing direction 3 meters down, the way the water darkened in a specific arc when a shoal was moving eastward beneath it. The angle at which the pelicans were flying that told him, with consistent accuracy, where the fish had been and where they were going. The other fishermen in Anamabo knew this about him. They often positioned their own boats relative to where Kwadwo had already moved, the way you navigate by a compass someone else is holding. This skill had never once been worth anything to anyone outside the fishing beach at Anamabo. Until it was. The man's name was Obinna Akebe. He was 47 years old, and Kwadwo learned this slowly, over the 40 minutes they sat on the beach while the sea went about its business, and the sun moved from the horizon to the position where the day starts to mean itself. Obinna was from Lagos. He said this the way Lagosians say it, as a fact that requires no elaboration. He said he had come to Anamabo to attend a meeting at a guest house near the beach. He had walked down to the waterfront at 5:45 that morning because he had not slept and had wanted air. He said this, and then said nothing else, and looked at the sea. Kwadwo did not ask what had taken him to the water's edge at 6:09 on a Thursday morning in a pressed white shirt and leather shoes. He said, "There's tea at my house, if you want it." Obinna looked at him. He said, "I'm a stranger." Kwadwo said, "The house is there." He stood up and walked toward the compound. After a moment, Obinna Akebe got up and followed him. Amma gave Obinna a towel and a dry wrapper to wear while his shirt dried on the line outside. She set a mug of ginger tea on the table in front of him. She did not ask questions. She went back to the fire. This was her dignity, the same as Kwadwo's. She did not require an explanation from a person before she helped him. Obinna Akebe sat in Kwadwo's kitchen, wearing a wrapper that belonged to Kwadwo's younger daughter, drinking ginger tea that Amma had made from the root she kept in a tin near the coal pot, and he looked at the carved wooden fish sitting on the shelf above the radio, and he went. Very still. Kwadwo was at the back of the room checking his net. He noticed the man go still. He noted it the way he noted everything on the water, registered it, filed it, did not immediately know what it meant. He did not need to. In 6 days, someone else would tell him. Bright Future Credit's Cape Coast office was on Kotakoraba Road, on the second floor of a building that had a mobile money kiosk on the ground floor and a man who sold phone charging cables on the pavement outside. Kwadwo knew the staircase well. He had climbed it 9 times in 3 years. The metal banister was painted blue, and the air on the staircase smelled of copy paper and something electrical. The smell he now associated entirely with conversations that ended the same way, with a payment receipt, and nothing changed. By the 4th visit, he had stopped reading the motivational posters in the waiting area. One said, "Your future starts with a plan." One said, "We grow with you." He had looked at that second one for a long time on the 6th visit, and then not looked at it again. The 10th time was on a Tuesday in the 3rd week of October, when he went in to make the monthly interest payment and to ask, again, whether there was any arrangement by which the principal could be restructured. He had rehearsed how to put this on the trotro from Anamabo, not the words exactly, but the shape of it, the way of asking a thing without making the person you are asking feel blamed for the answer. Because he had learned that when you make the person feel blamed, they stop listening to the question. Kofi Barima was at his desk. He was 29 years old and wore a tie every day. A different tie each visit, which Kwadwo had noticed because it was the only thing that changed, and he had a company mug on his desk that said Bright Future in yellow letters on a blue background. He spoke with the particular patience of a man who believes that if he is patient enough, difficult conversations will end on their own. He said, "Mr. Mensah, the loan agreement is clear on the terms." Kwadwo said, "I'm not disputing the terms. I'm asking whether there is a restructuring option." Kofi Barima said, "That would require approval from our head office in Accra. The standard waiting period is 12 to 16 weeks. And we would need to see evidence that your monthly income has changed sufficiently to support a revised repayment structure." Kwadwo said, "The income hasn't changed. The catch has been poor." Kofi Barima said, "Then there would be very little basis for the head office to approve a restructure." He folded his hands on the desk. "My advice would be to continue with the current payments and consider supplementary income options." A man sitting at the adjacent desk, who had not looked up during this exchange, turned a page in the file he was reading. A woman came out of the back office with a ream of paper and went back in without pausing. Kwadwo said, "If I continue with the current payments, the loan clears in 11 years. Kofi Barima said, "That is possible, yes, depending on the interest accrual." Kwadwo said, "I'm 54 years old." Kofi Barima said, "I understand that." His hands did not move. There was a pause in which both men said nothing. Then Kwadwo placed the 57 cedis on the desk in a careful stack. He had folded the bills at home so they would lie flat. And Kofi Barima printed the payment receipt on the small printer to his left and slid it across. Kwadwo folded it into the same pocket where he kept the others. 27 receipts now, creased and soft, which he kept because they were proof of something he could not prove any other way, that he had not missed a single month. He went down the stairs. The man selling phone cables outside looked at his face and said, "Brother, you okay?" Kwadwo said, "I'm fine." He stood at the Trotro station for 4 minutes before the vehicle came. The October heat sat on Cape Coast the way October heat does. Not the burning heat of July, but something heavier and more settled. The kind that presses on the top of your head and the back of your neck, and simply waits. The street smelled of exhaust and roasted plantain from a cellar up the road and the sharp edge of the open drainage channel along the roadside. A generator at the building opposite ran at a frequency he felt in his back teeth. 2 young men nearby argued about football without anger, the way you argue about things you can afford to be wrong about. He got into the Trotro when it came and sat by the window. The vehicle moved east along the coastal road, and the sea appeared on his right side, flat and silver in the afternoon light. The same sea he had been reading since he was 14 years old, and his father first put him in a boat. He looked at it for the 40-minute journey back to Anamabo. He did not think about the loan or the receipt or Kofi Barima's folded hands. He just looked at the water. Amma had groundnut soup with yam ready when he came in. She set a large portion in front of him without asking how it had gone. Zuri was doing homework at the other end of the table. Willa was at her night school and would not be back until Thursday. The generator hummed outside. The zinc basin in the eastern corner stood empty. No rain since the weekend. He ate. He told Amma, "The soup was very good," she said, "Eat all of it." He sat at the table after Zuri went to her room and took the stack of 27 receipts from his pocket and counted them once more. 3 years of Tuesdays. He put them back and went to bed. 2 weeks later, the October rains returned. He placed the basin under the zinc corner. He emptied it Thursday morning. On Saturday, the car came. If this story is moving in your chest the way I think it is, subscribe before we get to what happens next. Because what arrives at the compound gate on Saturday morning is something Kwadwo Mensah had no way to prepare for. On the Saturday, a car came. It was not the kind of car that came to Anamabo often, a black Mercedes-Benz, clean, with a driver who stayed in the vehicle. The passenger who got out was a woman Kwadwo had never seen. She was perhaps 60, small, with the posture of a person who has spent a long time being listened to and has not forgotten how to require it. She wore a black dress and carried a folder, and she came to the compound gate and asked for Kwadwo Mensah by name. Amma came to the gate. She said, "He's at the boat." The woman said, "I can wait." She waited. She sat on the bench near the gate that Kwadwo's father had made from a piece of driftwood 30 years ago, and she held the folder on her lap, and she looked at the sea. When Kwadwo came up the beach 40 minutes later and saw her, he slowed his walk without meaning to. She stood when she saw him coming. She said, "My name is Nana Owusu Boateng. I am the private legal representative of Obinna Akebe." She pronounced the name carefully and watched his face. He said, "The man from the water." She said, "Yes." He said, "Is he all right?" She paused for a moment before answering. The pause lasted 4 seconds. She said, "He is alive. Because of you." Another pause. "Mr. Akebe has asked me to come in his place. He is not able to come himself yet. He wanted me to bring you something and to explain what I can." She opened the folder. What was inside it was not one document, but several. A letter on heavy paper with a Lagos address, a printed statement from a financial institution, and a smaller envelope, sealed. She set the sealed envelope to one side and showed him the other two first. She said, "Mr. Akebe is the Regional Director of West Africa Operations for a Marine Resources Development Company. He came to Anamabo for a meeting about coastal fishing community investment programs. He was walking on the waterfront that morning because he had received news, the night before, that his business partner had died. They had built the company together over 19 years. She stopped. He was not in a good state when he went to the water. He has told me to tell you that he knows what he was doing at that edge, and that he wants you to understand what you pulled him back from, not just the water." Kwadwo stood at his own gate in his fishing clothes, holding nothing, listening. She placed the printed financial statement on top of the folder and turned it so he could read it. It was a payment confirmation from Bright Future Credit's Accra head office. It was dated the previous Wednesday, 3 days ago. The amount was 2,870 setis. In the column marked account status was a single word, cleared. He read the document twice. Then he looked up at her. She said, "Mr. Akebe also asked me to tell you that the loan was not a gift. He does not believe in gifts between strangers. He said to tell you that specifically. He says it is a debt. He was the one in debt. Now it is settled." She handed him the sealed envelope last. He said, "What is this?" She said, "He asked me to give you that one directly and not explain it. He said you will understand when you open it." Nana Owusu Boateng stayed for the tea Alma pressed on her, which she accepted without hesitation. She sat at the kitchen table and answered the questions she could answer and did not pretend about the ones she could not. She told them that Obina Akebe had asked to come himself and had not been able to, not because of any reason she could speak to further. She told them that the payment had been made directly to the head office in Accra, which was why the branch on Kotokoraba Road had not yet notified Kwadwo. The notification letter was en route, but the account was cleared, and she had brought a copy of the settlement confirmation that would be accepted at any branch. She left at 11:45. The car took her back toward Cape Coast. Kwadwo sat at the table for a long time after she left. Alma sat across from him. She did not speak. The copy of the settlement confirmation was on the table between them. He had set it there when Nana Owusu Boateng handed it to him, and he had not moved it since. He picked up the sealed envelope. Inside was a folded piece of paper. It was not heavy paper like the letter from the folder. It was ordinary paper, the kind you buy at any stationery shop, folded twice. He opened it. The handwriting was not neat. It was the handwriting of a man who had written this more than once and started again, which you could tell by the way the words were placed on the page. Careful, like each one had been considered, not for elegance, but for exactness. It said, "There was a wooden fish on the shelf in your kitchen. My father had one. He was a fisherman from Anamabo. He left before I was born and I never met him. My mother kept a photograph of the fish. I have been looking for the family here for 11 years. I did not expect to find it the way I did. The lawyer can tell you the rest if you want to know it. If you don't, that is also fine. You already gave me more than I can account for. O.A." Kwadwo read it twice. He set it on the table. He looked at the shelf above the radio where the carved wooden fish sat in its place, dark and smooth, the length of his palm. Alma reached across the table and picked up the letter. She read it. She set it down. She looked at the fish. She looked at Kwadwo. He said, "My grandfather came from a large family. His brother left Anamabo when they were young. Nobody knew where he went. The kitchen was very quiet. Outside, the sea was doing what the sea does, indifferent and continuous, and very old." By December of that year, Nana Owusu Boateng had come to Anamabo twice more. She brought documents each time, records from Lagos, records from a registry in Cape Coast, the kind of paper that establishes connections between people who live their lives in different places without knowing what they shared. The connections were verified by the fourth visit. Kwadwo Mensah and Obina Akebe were not close cousins. They were the grandsons of two brothers who had separated in 1961, when Anamabo was a different kind of place, and a man could leave and lose the thread back home entirely. Obina came in January. He came without the pressed white shirt this time, in ordinary clothes, the kind you wear when you are going somewhere you want to be received as yourself. He was thinner than he had been in October. His eyes were the eyes of a man who had decided to stay. He sat in the same chair, in the same kitchen. Alma made ginger tea again. Zuri brought her homework to the table and did it there without being asked to leave, because nobody asked her to. Kwadwo set the wooden fish between them on the table. Obina picked it up. He held it the way you hold something that is older than you and knows it. He turned it over once. He set it back down. He said, "My mother showed me the photograph every year on my birthday. She said it was so I would know where I was from even if I never went there." Quadwo said, "She raised you alone?" He said, "She did." Quadwo nodded. He picked up the fish. He held it for a moment. Then he held it out toward Obinna. Obinna shook his head. He said, "It belongs here. I just needed to hold it once." The zinc sheeting on the eastern corner of the roof was replaced in February, not by a payment from Obinna Akebe's company, which Quadwo had not asked for and would not have taken. It was replaced because the loan was gone, and the money that had been going to interest for 3 years went to the roof instead, in one purchase. On a morning, when the hardware seller in town loaded the sheets into a borrowed truck, and 2 of Quadwo's neighbors helped carry them up and nail them down. The work took 4 hours. Amma made jollof rice and fried plantain for everyone who helped. That evening, when the first light rain of the season came, Quadwo sat in the main room and listened. The eastern corner of the roof was silent. Obinna Akebe's company opened a coastal resources office in Cape Coast the following April. The office worked with fishing communities across the central region coast, documenting traditional sea reading knowledge. The kind of knowledge that exists only in the hands and eyes of men like Quadwo, passed from boat to boat across generations, never written down. Quadwo was the first person they consulted. His name was on the first page of the first report the office produced, listed under the heading, Primary Knowledge Holder, an Amabo fishing community. He had never seen his name in a document that was not a loan statement or a payment receipt. The world had looked at Quadwo Mensa for 54 years and seen a poor fisherman with a debt he could not clear. It had been looking at the wrong thing, the way it always looks at the wrong thing: the hole in the account, the patch in the net, the zinc basin catching rain in the corner. The world has a habit of measuring what is missing and calling that the person. What it could not measure was the thing that sent him into the water at 6:09 on a Thursday morning without asking whether it was worth it. Not courage. Courage is too large a word for something that happened in 11 seconds before he thought about it. Something simpler than courage. The decision, held somewhere older than thought, that a person in the water is a person in the water, and that is enough. There are things that cannot be taken from a man, not by interest rates, not by 11 years of payments, not by a loan officer who folds his hands and explains, with patience, why the terms cannot change. The capacity for that 11-second decision is one of them. It lives in the same place as the knowledge of where the fish are moving and what the current is doing 40 seconds before it pulls someone under. You cannot borrow it. You cannot find it in a folder. You cannot schedule it in an appointment. If you were standing on that beach at 6:09 in the morning and a stranger went under, a stranger in good clothes, with no explanation, who had walked too close to the edge of something you didn't understand, would you go in? And if you knew it would cost you nothing and gain you nothing, would that change your answer? Leave your answer in the comments. I really want to read it. Subscribe for more stories about hidden strength, quiet power, and the people the world overlooks until they change everything. I'll see you in the next one.